Hey Corey, I really enjoyed listening to your thoughts about the Logos language uh, because I think you really recognize the cosmological importance of this question of language. Because if we're going to say that only human beings gain access to this realm of ideas through uh, words and conversation and dialectic and so forth, if that's only a human capacity, then we're left with this problem of figuring out how human signs and symbols relate to natural facts and events. And I think at the end of the day, we have to recognize that because we're always already doing language, we're only ever going to have a mythological account of its origin. We cannot step outside of our own use of words to explain them. And that is the mythological component of experience. And I think at the end of the day, for pragmatic reasons, much like John Dewey, experience and reality are synonymous, as far as I'm concerned. Um, what there is, what there uh, are experiences, events which are experienced, and experience is always meaningful. So, cosmologically, the Logos has been at work since the very beginning. Since you know, we could call it the Big Bang, but I think there's see that was originally that name for this theory of an expansionary universe. Was I forget the guy's name who said this, but he was trying to you know point out its absurdity by calling it just the Big Bang theory. Like all of a sudden, poof, there it was. And more recently, there's an acknowledgement that if for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, then any Big Bang must also be a big suck. There cannot be an evolution and an expansion without an involution and an inward folding. And I think to try to understand how the Logos is at work in the cosmos, we could think with Teilhard and about the law of complexity consciousness. That as matter congeals into higher and higher forms of order, like atoms, stars, planets, with the life is a planetary affair. Never, for very long at least, will you find isolated pockets of life barely surviving on the surface of a planet. If life doesn't take over and start to regulate the climate of the planet, then it's going to be exterminated very quickly by the harsh reality of interplanetary and interstellar weather. And matter then congeals into animals, multicellular organisms, and they have these inwardly folded, branching trees of nervous tissue, which electrochemically brings forth a sensory motor response to an environment, and a coupling to other beings in that environment. So it's not just like there's ego and world. There's also interego, intersubjectivity, that is part of my own interiority. It's our shared interiority. We have that space. We also have this self-reflexive, inwardly spiraling, solipsistic, personal mind, private mind. We have both of those, but we're never in one or the other fully. It's always sort of a dance between each. Um, and I think it might be appropriate to read maybe a paragraph or two from Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay on nature, chapter 4, the part on language. Um, it's page 22 of this edition, American Library, if you have that one. A man's power to connect his thought with its proper symbol, and so to utter it, depends on the simplicity of his character. That is, upon his love of truth, and his desire to communicate it without loss. The corruption of man is followed by the corruption of language. When simplicity of character and the sovereignty of ideas is broken up by the prevalence of secondary desires, the desire of riches, of pleasure, of power, and of praise, and duplicity and falsehood take place of simplicity and truth, the power over nature, as an interpreter of the will, is in a degree lost. New imagery ceases to be created, and old words are perverted to stand for things which are not. A paper currency is employed, when there is no bullion in the vaults. In due time the fund is manifest, and words lose all power to stimulate the understanding or the affections. Hundreds of writers may be found in every long civilized nation who for a short time believe and make others believe that they see and utter truths, who do not of themselves clothe one thought in its natural garment, but who feed unconsciously on the language created by the primary writers of the country, those, namely, who hold primarily on nature. But wise men pierce this rotten diction and fasten words again to visible things, so that picturesque language is at once a commanding certificate that he who employs it is a man in alliance with truth and God. The moment of our discourse rises above the ground line of familiar facts and is inflamed with passion or exalted by thought. It clothes itself in images. A man conversing in earnest, if he watch his intellectual processes, will find that a material image, more or less luminous, arises in his mind, contemporaneous with every thought, which furnishes the vestment of the thought. Hence, good writing and brilliant discourse are perpetual allegories. This imagery is spontaneous. It is the blending of experience with the present action of the mind. It is proper creation. It is the working of the original cause through the instruments he has already made. These facts may suggest the advantage which the country life possesses for a powerful mind over the artificial and curtailed life of cities. We know more from nature than we can at will communicate. Its light flows into the mind ever more, and we forget its presence. The poet, the orator, bred in the woods, whose senses have been nourished by their fair and appeasing changes year after year, without design and without heed, shall not lose their lesson altogether in the roar of cities or the broil of politics. Long hereafter, amidst agitation and terror, in national councils, in the hour of revolution, these solemn images shall reappear in their morning luster, as fit symbols and words of the thoughts which the passing events shall awaken. At the call of a noble sentiment, again the woods wave, the pines murmur, the river rolls and shines, and the cattle low upon the mountains, as he saw and heard them in his infancy. And with these forms, the spells of persuasion, the keys of power, are put into his hands.